New world, new job, new life. Unemployed and looking for work. Once more, I was looking for a job. Between contracts, I needed a job, some kind of work. Full-time employee, consultant, contract, any kind of gig. I learned of an opportunity with a company named Crystal Dynamics that was based in Palo Alto, California. I was lucky and got an interview with the company's vice president, who was also the hiring decision maker. And she was a woman in the computer and video game industry, which made her a very rare breed indeed. She interviewed me in her office on a two-person Hollywood-style casting love seat couch. She leaned in uncomfortably, often, and a few times she brushed against my arm and leg, and finally it was explicitly clear that she was expressing interest in me when she set her hand on my upper inner thigh and left it there, resting. It was bizarre. There it was. Crystal Dynamics' vice president of development was clearly committing sexual harassment during the interview by leaning in closely and brushing against my arms and legs and resting her hand on my inner thigh. I am quite confident that my experience is not appropriate in any interview. Had I done that on an interview, I would get in great trouble. In fact, I definitely know, had I ever done what that vice president did to me in an interview with a female candidate, I would have been fired and maybe even sued. But apparently no one cared if a woman did that to a man. I had thought this was a traditionally misogynistic interview. Power play or outright sexual manipulation by men was long dead. But there it was. And with me. By a woman. With me. Seriously. All I can say is wow. Never had I ever imagined such a thing could happen to anyone that I knew, much less to me. I never considered myself so attractive that a person would leverage their position of authority or power over me to encourage intimate or outright explicit sexual engagement. Well, I refused, and I openly questioned what she was doing with her hands and getting so close to me. Well, she was off put, of course. Surprisingly not, I was not offered a job. It did not matter how qualified I was. From what I could tell based on how things went, it was all about whether or not I got along with that vice president. Well, I kept looking for a job. A job recruiter friend of mine named Charles Weitzer, whom I had met when recruiting staff at Atari Games. Well, he called me and he told me about an opportunity in Southern California at a company called Interplay, if I was open to relocating from Northern California to Southern California for a job. Charles arranged an interview since I expressed how great it was that he called when he did, because I was afraid of ending up with no income and no money at the rate things were going. I flew down to John Wayne Airport in Irvine, Orange County, California. Interplay was a small company of a few hundred employees. They had a great history of making games for gamers. Its founder, Brian Fargo, was renowned for creating Baldur's Gate and the Bard's Tale series. I had played and greatly enjoyed both of those games. Interplay was a great gamer company. They hired me on the spot, and I moved swiftly to Irvine and began my full-time employment at Interplay as a senior software engineer, working on recovering a failed contract development game called Star Trek New Worlds. The job was arduous, and the game was written in C++. I had previously programmed many computer languages, including C, assembly machine languages, RISC, Pascal, BASIC, and many more. but I had not programmed C++. But as always, I learned as I went. I have always been a highly proficient self-teacher. Consequently, no one ever knew that I did not know C++ before working on Star Trek. New Worlds was finished and released as planned. Once more, I saved the day. Interplay celebrated its holiday parties in its late years in a cost-effective way. Brian Fargo was said to be one-third stake owner in a local nightclub called the Galaxy Theater, based in Orange County, California, and was likewise a one-third stakeholder in a service called Club Rubber. Club Rubber hosted alternative lifestyle, kinky social events and parties, and was reputed to be a drug venue. Brian combined Club Rubber with the Galaxy Theater to form Rubber Bashes and various kinky ball-like events for alternative lifestyle people to engage with one another. There were more than a few days when fellow developers and I would be returning from lunch or just crossing the parking lot between Interplay's two buildings, and we would witness Brian Fargo's personal trainers arrive for his afternoon workouts. Well, Brian's personal trainers appeared much more like prostitutes. They wore excessive makeup and either wore full-body catsuits or miniskirts with nylons and tight tops. Neither their attire nor their makeup seemed consistent with a fitness trainer, and people spoke of the workout sounds from Brian's office that sounded more rhythmic and with moans and groans. It was theorized that Brian was working out to his sexual fantasies. It was a good thing Brian Fargo had his own bathroom annexed to his office. We all cringed at how emboldened Brian was to flagrantly use prostitutes at work. But that was an aspect of him that we had to accept or look the other way, so we could just ignore it and carry on. Let's get back to Interplay and its holiday parties. So like I said, Interplay celebrated its holiday parties in its late years in more cost-effective ways. Interplay leveraged Brian Fargo's stake in the Galaxy Theater to secure it to host company parties. One year, Interplay was so cost-effective for its Christmas party that it did not close the Galaxy Theater from the public, and so staff were given admission and drink tickets for standard drinks, aka a beer or a glass of house wine. It was sad and pathetic, but it was a foreboding sign of what was to come. Now, that was cheap of Interplay to host its Christmas party in an open public nightclub, but it was a herald, like I say, of Interplay's forthcoming bankruptcy and its fire sale acquisition to a company called Titus Interactive based out of France. We'll have more on that later. None of us cared for the theater's dark club venue because we could not talk with anyone or share any ideas. The Galaxy Theater was designed to segment people into separate dance floors so they could socialize in groups or pods. There were booths specifically designed to isolate subgroups of people from each other so they could congregate but be isolated. Interplay extolled the Christmas party as epic and legendary, and all the propaganda that they could muster to rationalize the inexpensive holiday party that most no one liked. Interplay was struggling in other divisions and had the audacity to not give each of us, a developer of Star Trek New Worlds, a single customary free copy of the very game we just made and shipped. It was insane. Never had I ever heard of a company that would not give one single copy of a game that people made themselves when it went to market. Well, it was unacceptable. It could not stand. I went to the division vice president, a man named Brian Christian, and I made my opinion extremely clear. Prior to entering gaming, Brian had earned 15 platinum and 22 gold records for his work on various albums, including Pink Floyd's The Wall. In gaming, he held several positions that spanned Interplay to Konami Digital Entertainment to THQ to Take-Two Interactive, and even more, I believe. Brian Christian was a highly creative, passionate, and emotional man. So Brian heard my demand, but his 2-year-old inside him reacted instead of the mature, experienced producer that he was. Brian's resume gave him a huge ego, and he was having nothing of my commanding him to do anything. He was not about to just accept my demands and hand over copies of the game to the team. He got so angry and he demanded, "No, get out, do not tell me what to do." Now, Brian was normally, I thought, a reasonable, albeit emotional person. He did not handle his emotions well, however. I saw him once so high on drugs from self-medicating over emotional duress that he literally dragged himself along the hallway walls into his office to slump into his chair. Well, about the recognition game for shipping Star Trek New Worlds, I demanded that Brian give everyone on the team their promised copy of the game, or I would resign. He was unmoved. I stomped out of the building mid-afternoon and I did not return. Later, I received a call from a colleague and friend, Doug Brandon, who informed me that Brian went up to Brian Fargo, Interplay's founder and CEO, and told him of my rant. Brian Fargo told Brian Christian to just give everyone a game copy. And why the heck did it come up to him to make that simple, stupid decision? Well, not only did everyone get their game copy, but they gave me a box of copies to make a point, they said. Well, I went around and gave everyone extra copies, and I still had extras for myself. It amazed me that Interplay lost more money and productivity and morale because they just wouldn't hand out a $5 cost of goods copy of a game per developer. Interplay did not have strategic thinking as it ruled itself with emotions, much like Brian Christian. Interplay had been struggling financially and everyone knew it. But we did not know how razor thin Interplay's survival really was. Brian Fargo even took the company public in an open offering as Interplay Entertainment to generate cash, in hopes to keep the business alive. But that resulted in loss of control of Interplay's management, which was not necessarily a bad thing, seeing as Brian Fargo was not the most rational and business savvy of leaders, but he was a good developer and gamer. Tragically though, the board of Interplay Entertainment empowered Brian Fargo to continue running the company any way he saw fit, which is of course how we got to the bad place it was in to begin with. So, with no adult supervision from the investments, Brian Fargo drove Interplay into the ground, and it never returned anything back to its investors. The stock plummeted, and it entered penny stocks. Interplay desperately sought more investors, but it was hopeless. They had no way to convince anyone to invest further in the dying company. Titus Interactive of France purchased the controlling interest of Interplay, and they gutted the company for its assets, and they only hired some of its staff, just to manage what they acquired. I was one of those people that was laid off from Interplay, but then hired by Titus the next week. I became France-based Titus's United States Technical Director, overseeing all technology and development for the United States and Canada and Mexico, should we ever have a developer there, which we did not. And I was to manage South Korean developers as well, simply because no one else in Titus was going to do that either.